When someone you reach out to for support is more a hindrance than they're a help, or the support comes with some very unhealthy strings attached, or causes you to feel diminished in some way, then you are experiencing a phenomenon that I have termed as toxic support. And this is something I see is rarely talked about because when I was researching this video, I found very little material about it. And I really wanted to talk about this topic today because I recently went through a life-threatening crisis, which is the topic for a whole other video. And I saw and I noticed that my support system crumbled in the face of this experience. And it was a deeply painful wake-up call for me to explore in depth my support systems and who I thought were people in my life who were supportive, and the actual versus imagined outcome when I sought support from them at probably the worst time in my life. Whatever I'm talking about here is purely my understanding. It's my observations and coming from my own experience. These are in no way abject facts, and I'm not talking about this or as a collective fact. And I would love to hear from you about your own experiences, or if you resonate with some or all aspects of the video, because I would love to study this phenomenon more deeply. But for today, here it is, my thoughts. So let's look at the definition of support. There are several different definitions in different dictionaries, but the one I really loved is the Cambridge Dictionary. And it says it means to agree with and give encouragement to something or someone because you want him or her to succeed. I really love this one because it covers the meaning of support in the way that I seek support, or in the way that I understand it best. And I noticed that the dictionary meanings are as varied as the term, which shows that the term can be used broadly and it can mean slightly different things to different people depending on the situation and the unique needs of the person seeking support. Based on my own experiences, I have actually created a chart, and I'm so sorry I had a very beautiful PPT chart ready, which due to tech reasons I'm not being able to use. So here is the chart. I'm sorry. I promise you there's a better chart which I'll cut copy below. But basically I call this chart the hierarchy of support. And I'm going to explain this chart to you in a very brief way at the moment. And you can see that support, the pyramid in the middle represents the support that we need in terms of the different kinds of needs, emotional needs we may have, or psychological needs. And the outer part of the chart covers the environment and how important it is to have a supportive environment, which we'll talk about in a minute. So let's talk about right at the base here is the support just of somebody's presence. And I have observed that sometimes just the physical presence of someone can be very supportive. For example, many years ago, I was dating a man who was pretty toxic otherwise, and we didn't have a very happy relationship, and it eventually ended because he was very abusive to me. And we had gone down to the beach, and the two of us were just sitting there. It was really late and dark, and this beach had a reputation of having some dangerous predators around. And I remember feeling this deep sense of safety simply because he was present, not because of any action he was taking. And then I looked at my life and I realized that sometimes just having people around can feel supportive depending on what the situation is. And another example of this is when you're walking down a dark or a deserted street that may otherwise be very frightening or intimidating if you were alone, but just seeing people there. You don't know these people. You don't know that if something were to go wrong, would they even really help you or not? But just seeing those people And having their presence around gives you this sense of relief that, well, at least I'm not alone. And this is something that has to be said for the simple support of just having someone's presence. Now, as you can see, the second level here, I've got a couple of things happening. I'm so sorry about this really shoddy diagram. It was very last minute. But this is practical support. And this includes things like safety and emotional support and practical things like, having food when you need it. For example, when I went through this crisis recently, I normally prefer to cook my own meals, but when I went through this crisis, I had to order out all the time because I had zero time to cook. And I was really unhappy with the food I was eating because I needed healthier meals, but they were just not accessible to me at the moment. And there were people that showed up to help me out with that, even though it was just twice that someone did show up with a hot meal, packet specially for me. But even just those 2 times, I felt so deeply grateful because it meant a lot just to open the fridge and have something there that was freshly cooked and healthy. Now, when we talk about safety, that is another important kind of support. And the reason it gets a place in the second half of this pyramid is because sometimes our safety may be compromised, and anyone showing us safety or supporting our safety is going to be very important at that time. Again, going back to my crisis, I had a situation recently where I suddenly had to prevent a very dangerous man from entering the ICU where my father was hospitalized, because this person was intending to harm my father, and I had very little time to prevent this person from going in. So I was totally alone that day, and this man was literally threatening me and the hospital staff with dire consequences if he wasn't allowed to see my father. But I was adamant and very strong in my protest about not letting him in. And I even became really aggressive about it. But it was still a very scary experience because I felt entirely unsafe and alone at that time. Luckily, one of the senior staff of the hospital put his foot down and he said to everybody, "Look, it's her father, it's her decision. Please respect that." And in that moment, unknowingly to him, perhaps, he took care of my safety, and it was incredible. I'm forever grateful to this wonderful person for just having my back in that very terrifying moment. The fourth level of support is the psychological and emotional support, which the reason I put it up higher is because this kind of support can be difficult to get. Because if you have people around who lack psychological or emotional maturity, they can't offer you this kind of support, even if they wanted to. And it's very important, especially if you're a sensitive person like me and things affect you more deeply than others, to just have somebody who can hear you, who can validate you, who can see you, and who can give you a soft landing space for your thoughts and feelings at that point of time. And finally, we have the last level of support. So I've forgotten in my hurry because of the tech issue. This is right here. And this is when someone shares such a deep connection with you that your safety is literally their top priority. And usually this is the kind of support that would come from either very close family members or relationships between a parent and a child or spouses or anyone who is deeply connected to you in that way and will literally fight for your life, and they don't need to be motivated to do so. This is intrinsic. I had this friend who sadly is no longer in the world with us, and although he wasn't a family member, we had this. I had this connection with him that where he would literally fight with his life to protect me. And it was intrinsic, it was not something I would have to even ask for. And if he ever sensed that I was in any kind of trouble or any danger, it was a no brainer for him. He would just be there, literally rescue me or even fight for my life if necessary. He once flew almost 5,000 kilometers because he sensed that I was in trouble just to be with me. And the reason I put it right on top there, even though, sorry, I've not put the name in there, but I've talked about it, is because it is something that we have with people that we share a very deep connection with. And it's precious and it's an important type of support. The one thing I've learned about life, especially with all the crises I've been through, is that life can get really tough sometimes. And as someone with a lived experience of that, I can say with confidence that when it gets really rough, you're gonna need or want this level of commitment to your well-being and to be present in your life. And that's why it gets the position right on top. Now, when we look at the circles outside, I've only identified 2 at the moment. The first thing we're looking at is institutional support. And this can make your life much easier or much harder in situations when they are involved at any given point of time. So coming back to my example, I went through a terrible life-threatening crisis recently that involved hospitals, lawyers, the police, and some other authority figures. And the support that I would need from them was very important because it enabled me to crucially and successfully overcome that difficult situation. And in this case, I found very little institutional support. Certainly, some institutions were amazing and I'm deeply grateful for them, but a lot of the authority figures that were meant to perform certain duties failed to perform their duties in the way that they should have, and it made my life so much harder in a situation that was already deeply difficult. And finally, we're looking at grace, which is right on the outside, which in my understanding is the feeling that the universe has your back and is always going to be there with you no matter what. It's a deeply private experience, but this is what you access through your faith in the universe, your trust in the universe, and your faith in a higher power. Of course, if you believe in that kind of stuff, then grace makes sense. But not everybody watching this video may be spiritual or religious. So I'll leave it to you to discern whether this is something you find supportive or not. But it's certainly been a big factor for me. In fact, I would go to the extent to say that I would not be alive right now if it wasn't for the grace of a higher power. And I strongly believe that. And the second part of this video is going to cover more deeply what exactly is toxic support, because till now we have spoken at length about what my definition of support is, what I have observed about support as a phenomenon. So wait for it. Part 2, we get more deeply into how the support that we need can exist, but in a way that's toxic to us, and how the consequences of that in our life. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.